Hi, my name is Andrew Sanders, and I'm an assistant professor of political science at Texas A&M University in San Antonio. I'm originally from the UK, I'm from Edinburgh in Scotland, and I studied in Queen's University in Belfast, where I completed my PhD in politics. We moved to the United States in 2012, originally in Houston, and then to San Antonio when I started working at A&M SA in the summer of 2016. I've been asked today to record a short video to talk a little bit about activism, civic engagement, and advocacy. And what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about how activism has influenced the work that I do, how we've tried to encourage civic engagement in class, and then if there's time also to talk about my own views on the topic. So as you can see, if you look around me, the books on either side and some of the other memorabilia that you might be able to see, I study the Northern Ireland conflict. So this large book here is a book called Lost Lives. This details every death that occurred as a result of the conflict in Northern Ireland. And the first death took place in 1966, and the book goes all the way through to the early 2000s when this recent edition was published. On the other side, you see some books that cover particular groups that were involved in the Northern Ireland conflict. So the conflict itself began in the late 1960s, and it actually started off as a civil rights campaign. And what happened in Northern Ireland was that Northern Ireland was created in the early 1920s, and it was designed in such a way that the state would tend to return Protestant elected representatives. Now, the Northern Ireland conflict isn't necessarily a religious conflict, or it wasn't necessarily a religious conflict, and the divide is not necessarily religious. But religion tends to play into national identity, and this is quite a long, complicated story of British and Irish history, so I won't go into it too much, but do feel free to get in touch if you're interested in learning more. But Catholics were typically denied certain rights. So Catholics were second choice when it came to housing allocation. Catholics were typically denied the right to vote if they didn't own a property. And Catholic areas were gerrymandered in such a way that Catholics did not receive proportional representation in local councils and certainly in the Northern Ireland government. This led to a civil rights campaign which was modelled on the civil rights campaign in the United States during the 1960s. They used a lot of the same slogans, they sang a lot of the same songs, and it also met with violence. Now, in Northern Ireland, they introduced reforms during the height of the civil rights campaign in 1968, but a lot of those reforms weren't implemented until it was too late, by which point people who were perhaps a little more malevolent in their intentions and were keen to start a violent uprising against the British presence in Ireland had started to gather momentum. Now, that level of civil rights activism prompted political reform. The problem was that by the time we got to 1970, the conflict was very much underway, and the British Army had arrived in Northern Ireland in the summer of 1969 to relieve the police, who had been unable to deal with protest marches and counter-protests, and basically had lost the ability to effectively control the security situation in Northern Ireland. Once the army came in, the army were seen as a neutral force. They came in to stop attacks on Catholic homes. They came in to stop any kind of outbreak of violence, but that only lasted for a very short period of time. And by the time we get into 1970, 1971, the army were now seen as being there to copper fasten the British presence in Ireland. This was offensive to the identities of the people in Northern Ireland who saw themselves and continue to see themselves as Irish rather than British. And the conflict rather exacerbated from there. when we get into 1972, it was the most violent year of the conflict, and the most violent year of the conflict in Northern Ireland. Britain lost more soldiers than it did in any year of British involvement in the recent war in Iraq. So that tells you how violent things actually got. One of the things that has been quite important to the Northern Ireland peace process has been the ability for people to engage civically. And one of the solutions that was implemented was a power-sharing government where Irish nationalists and unionists who seek to maintain Northern Ireland's union with Great Britain govern together. And they're elected on a proportional representation system using a transferable vote. So when you get your ballot, you rank the candidates 1 through 5, 6, or 7, or however many there are. And every time a candidate is eliminated, their second choice votes go to the other candidates, and every time a candidate meets the number of votes required to be elected, all the remaining ballots are then allocated to the number 2 on the ballot, and so on and so forth. So this encourages people to vote because their vote counts for a lot more. And this has been quite a useful way of ensuring reasonable levels of civic engagement. Civic engagement is something that we try to encourage in our students here at A&M in San Antonio. What we've been doing since 2016, when the political science program really started to develop, is to bring elected representatives and candidates to campus to talk directly to students. This is important because students often don't realize that they are the bosses of these elected representatives. They're paid using tax dollars, therefore they are accountable to you. And it's always interesting to see students come to realize that and develop their sense of engagement with their elected representatives. We do an assignment in class where I ask students to identify all of their elected representatives, wherever it is that they live, and they compile a list from the president all the way down to the school board, or however far down the list they want to go. They're then asked to find a particular issue that concerns them and to find the appropriate political representative to bring that issue to. So if that means something like you have potholes on your street, okay, who's the person to go to for that? And in most cases, that's the city council. So you find your city council member, and the students are asked to then write a reflective paper talking about their whole experience. How easy was it to find the contact information for this person? How easy was it to get in touch with them? And how quickly was the situation resolved? What we tend to find in these assignments, and this is very much just my initial impression of grading these papers and talking to the students about their experience in class, is that students get much more engagement when they reach out to their local representatives. By the time you get up to the members of the House of Representatives or members of the Senate, there isn't typically that engagement there. Some students have had great success with their US reps, but usually it's the state reps, the state senators, and the members of the city council that students have the most success in terms of getting in touch with. Once the students have realized that there is actually somebody there who's responsible for fixing these issues, you can sort of see this light come on, and they realize, oh look, there is actually a way to try and improve that. And that for me is one of the most rewarding parts of teaching these courses. It's helping students to realize that actually there is somebody there who's responsible for fixing some of these problems. You don't have to just sit tight and swallow your tongue and nothing ever gets accomplished. You can actually do something here. And one of the other things that we've found is that when students actually call a person's office, or in some cases write or email, then they get more success in getting a response back. When students will contact somebody using some form of social media, that's usually not the most successful way of getting in touch with them. So teaching students about effective communication with their elected representatives has been something that's been a very useful skill for them to develop. So in conclusion, make sure that you're aware of who your elected representatives are. Make sure that you know their contact information, and make sure that when there are issues that arise, that somebody who's in a position of elected authority can at least seek to resolve for you, that you get in touch with them and let them know, and make sure that you keep on at them. My students have found that by calling their elected representatives, they get the most success in terms of getting a response. But you may find that there are other ways. And it's through this political engagement that we can actually work together to improve things for everybody, especially in our local communities. So, on top of doing that, make sure that you're registered to vote, and make sure that you get out to vote come November. Obviously, the pandemic going on, there are a lot of questions about how that's going to look, but you should know that the Bexar County Elections Department is working very hard. They're trying to figure out good solutions. Early voting is going to be available on campus this year, and that's something that if you can, you should take advantage of. So good luck, get out, hold them accountable.